The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Meridian Tower, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his blue maintenance uniform and checked his watch. 7:30 the executives would start, arriving soon, their polished shoes clicking against the floors he had spent the early hours perfecting. Marcus had been working as a janitor at the prestigious office building for 3 years now. It wasn't the career he had dreamed of when he was younger, but life had a way of changing plans. After his wife Sarah passed away 2 years ago, raising his 6-year-old daughter Emma became his only priority. The night shift at Meridian Tower paid well enough to cover their small apartment and Emma's needs, even if it meant he rarely saw her awake during weekdays. He wheeled his cleaning cart past the elevator bank, nodding respectfully to the 4 security guards who stood at attention. Near the entrance, they wore identical black suits and serious expressions, a reminder of the important people who worked in this building. Marcus had learned to move quietly around such places, to be helpful but invisible. As he began mopping the floor near the elevators, a soft whimper caught his attention. He looked up to see a small girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting on the cold marble floor. She had blonde hair that caught the morning light, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. Her small shoulders shook with each quiet sob. Marcus glanced around, expecting to see a frantic parent searching for their lost child, but the lobby was empty except for the guards, who seemed focused on their posts. He set down his mop and approached the little girl carefully. "Hey there," he said gently, crouching down to her level. "Are you okay?" The child looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. She couldn't seem to find words, only more tears. Marcus's heart ached, reminded of the times his own Emma had cried like this when she was scared or overwhelmed. "It's going to be all right," Marcus said softly. "My name is Marcus. What's your name?" "Sophie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's a beautiful name, Sophie. Are you waiting for someone?" Sophie nodded but didn't elaborate. Marcus could see she was in some kind of distress, the way children get when they're in an unfamiliar place and feeling lost. He remembered the little bottle of bubble solution in his cart, something he kept for Emma, for the rare occasions when she visited him at work during his breaks. "Sophie, would you like to see something magical?" Marcus asked, reaching into his cart. He pulled out the small plastic bottle and wand. Sophie's crying slowed as curiosity replaced fear in her expression. Marcus dipped the wand and blew gently, sending a stream of iridescent bubbles floating through the air. They caught the morning sunlight, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the marble walls. Sophie's eyes widened with wonder. A small smile began to replace her tears as she watched the bubbles float higher and higher. Marcus blew another stream, this time making bigger bubbles that Sophie tried to catch with her small hands. "They're pretty," Sophie said, her voice stronger now. "They are, aren't they?" Marcus agreed, sitting cross-legged on his green maintenance mat so he could be at her level. "Do you want to try?" He handed her the bubble wand, showing her how to dip it and blow gently. Sophie's first attempts produced tiny bubbles, but her giggles filled the quiet lobby as she got the hang of it. Marcus found himself laughing too, forgetting for a moment where they were. From the corner of his eye, Marcus noticed movement near the elevators. A tall woman in an elegant navy coat stood watching them, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She had the same blonde hair as Sophie, and something about her posture suggested she was used to being in control. Marcus assumed she must be another executive, probably annoyed by the noise in what was usually a silent, professional space. He started to apologize and pack up the bubbles, but Sophie was having too much fun to notice. She had discovered that she could make the bubbles bigger by blowing more softly, and her delighted squeals echoed off the marble walls. "Sophie," the woman in the navy coat called out, her voice carrying both relief and something else Marcus couldn't identify. "Mummy." Sophie jumped up and ran toward the woman. Leaving the bubble wand on the floor, Marcus quickly gathered his supplies, preparing to fade back into the background as he always did when the important people arrived. But as he stood up, the woman approached him instead of heading toward the elevators. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now than when she had called to Sophie. "I'm Victoria Whitmore. Sophie is my daughter." Marcus nodded politely. The name sounded familiar, though he couldn't place it. "Marcus Rodriguez, Mom. I hope we weren't being too loud. I just saw that she was upset and you were perfect." Victoria interrupted, and Marcus was surprised to see tears in her eyes. "I was in an emergency meeting upstairs. Sophie was supposed to wait in my office, but she must have gotten scared and wandered down here when I couldn't find her." She trailed off, looking down at her daughter who was now holding onto her coat. "She's a sweet kid," Marcus said simply. "Reminds me of my own daughter." Victoria studied Marcus for a long moment. "You have children?" "One, Emma. She's 6. Marcus wasn't sure why he was sharing this, but something about Victoria's expression invited honesty. "And you work nights here to support her?" Marcus nodded, wondering where this conversation was heading. Victoria looked around the pristine lobby, then back at Marcus. "Mr. Rodriguez, I own this building. Whitmore Industries occupies the top 15 floors." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had been letting the owner's daughter play with bubbles on the lobby floor while he should have been working. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I should have called security, or you should have done exactly what you did," Victoria said firmly. "Do you know what most people would have done? They would have called security and let someone else handle a crying child. But you sat with her. You made her laugh when she was scared." Sophie tugged on her mother's coat. "Mommy, Marcus has magic bubbles." Victoria smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "I can see that." She looked back at Marcus. "Mr. Rodriguez, I'd like to offer you a position. Head of our Employee Family Services Program. It would be a day job, better pay, and you'd be helping develop programs for employees with children." Marcus stared at her, certain he had misheard. "Ma'am, I'm just a janitor. I don't have any qualifications for. You have the most important qualification," Victoria said. "You saw a child who needed help, and your first instinct was to help her. That's not something you can teach." Marcus felt his eyes filling with tears. A day job would mean seeing Emma after school, helping with homework, being present for the small moments that made up childhood. "The position would start Monday, if you're interested," Victoria continued. "And Marcus, bring those bubbles with you. I have a feeling they'll come in handy." As Marcus watched Victoria and Sophie disappear into the elevator, he looked down at the small bottle of bubble solution in his hands. Sometimes, he thought, the simplest acts of kindness create the most unexpected magic. He couldn't wait to tell Emma that her daddy would be home for dinner that night, and every night after.